Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach podcast. Today, I have a very special guest for you. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Edwards, and she is a veterinarian of 25 plus years, a leadership coach, and a speaker. She built and sold a successful veterinary practice, and she now helps veterinary professionals create positive changes in both their personal and professional lives through proven leadership strategies and evidence-based coaching methods. She works with teams to help them develop high levels of communication and collaboration to create powerful outcomes. She also serves as the Wellness Committee Chair for the New Hampshire Veterinary Medical Association. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, just so everyone knows out there, Jennifer and I have not met before, but for the last 30 minutes, we've just been yakking it up. And we finally decided we better start the podcast because we were using up all the good information. So
Yes.
we finally decided to start. So, Jennifer, the first question I always ask everyone is to tell me their veterinary story. And you can start from wherever you want and tell me as much as you want.
Okay, well, I have a fairly long veterinary story. However, unlike a lot of people, it did not start when I was 8 years old. I actually went to college and got my degree in psychology. And
Oh,
my
I love that.
plan all through college was actually to go get a PhD in clinical psychology. And my senior year of college, out of seemingly nowhere, I just had this thought and I said, I'm going to vet school. So
Really?
yeah,
Like it was dropped from the universe or
it
from God or somebody, just like
that's
put it in your
pretty
head?
much how I live my life. All major decisions are
I
just
love that.
downloads that occur in a moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like that. It was vet school. I honestly don't know if I I went to Virginia Tech undergraduate, and if I had not been at a school that had a veterinary school, I don't know that I ever even would have thought of it.
Really?
But it was absolutely what I was meant to do. I did not have the classes I needed. I graduated from college, went back to undergraduate for 2 years, and then applied and luckily got into vet school on my first try. And I was very grateful for that. And then off I went with the story of school and getting into practice. In about 2007, early 2007, I opened a practice that I started and then spent 13 years running that, working, growing that practice, which I sold in the end of January of 2020.
Oh,
So,
wow. That was good timing.
yes, that was very good timing. That was
Oh
another,
my gosh, you just got it out under the wire. I
I
love it.
slid right under there. And that was actually another moment of a download decision. I had spent much of the spring of 2019 trying to buy a space. I was in a leased space, trying to buy a
Oh,
building,
yeah.
and that I was going to build out and move my practice. That would have committed me to it for, I mean, at least 5 years with the financial investment. And
Absolutely.
everything I tried to buy fell through. I mean, there was a building that had been on the market for 5 years. I offered exactly what they were asking, and the realtor said, "That's really weird. They just decided not to sell after I gave them your offer." And
Very
fast
strange.
forward to August of 2019, I'm driving down the road and I just got this message, sell your practice. So January 29th, 2020, off it goes. And a month and a half later, I found out why.
Yeah, that
Yep.
is crazy. That's
Uh-huh.
great timing. Well, that's just a really good lesson in like trusting your intuition or your God messages or the messages from the universe or whatever it is,
Right.
but just trusting it when it comes.
It is so important. There's so many people who don't think that they have intuition. You know, they see other people and they're like, oh, I don't really have that. And what I would offer to anyone listening is everybody has intuition,
Hmm.
100%. Nobody is excluded. It can take practice, though, to learn to recognize it, and even more so to learn to trust it and follow it and listen, because sometimes it can be scary, right? Like all of a sudden you're like,
Yes.
sell your practice. What? You
Yeah,
know,
then what do I do? Yeah,
right. Like, what
that's the
does
next
that look
question.
like? So it's it took, I mean, it's been many years, my whole life, I've been very intuitive, but over time, more and more, I've learned to trust and to follow. And so I would just offer for anybody to just start paying attention and just start
Yeah.
practicing.
That's great advice because I've had a few of those moments where I was like, I think this is the right thing to do, and I just feel it. Or even sometimes with animals, when you're working in the clinic, you'll be like, this dog needs a dental, but something about it makes me nervous putting it under or whatever. Even though you think everything looks fine on the surface, I'm having a weird feeling about this dog for some reason. And then it turns out eventually you figure out why, like something was there that you
Yes.
somehow knew without knowing. So, yeah, that's really good advice. So,
Yes.
going from psychology to veterinary medicine is like, I think perfect. I think we should all have had psych classes in vet school, don't you?
Oh,
To
100%.
deal with the clients and,
Right. Well, I always used to joke, people, of course, would always say, "Oh, it's so great you're a veterinarian because then you don't have to deal with people." And I would
oh,
always
yeah,
laugh.
that's the worst.
Yeah. And I would say, well, dogs have this really bad habit of bringing a human in attached to the other end of the leash.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big problem in our profession before we get into it, I guess, is the idea that we go into vet med because we don't want to deal with people. When
Right.
it's completely the opposite, right? You're always dealing with more people, more of the people than the dogs. I thought of the dogs as kind of the buffer
Right.
because I enjoyed them so much that I could deal with the people better. That's what I always thought. But
Yes. Yeah. I always used to say that when I was having a down day or something difficult going on, I would I focus a lot on energy. A lot of my coaching's around energy, and I would always go to an animal for like a hit of positive energy. Just bury my face in their neck, or just like and scrunch them up, and just really get present and connected to them, even for 10 seconds
yeah.
would rejuvenate me to then like stand. Like a lot of times it was in the exam room, I'd squat down to do whatever,
Mhm.
take my 10-second moment of connection, stand back up, and I was renewed to continue the conversation
You
with the
feel
client.
better, right? Yeah. I talk to animals, which is really weird, but I like have full conversations with my dogs. And my husband and my kids would laugh at me. My son used to say, Mom, why do you talk to the animals? And I'm like, well, because they like it and I like it, because
Yeah.
I'll say, oh, do you have to go outside? And then I'll say, yep, Trent has to go outside. Let's go outside, like they're answering me. And I used to do that with the clients' animals too, as I would go in and I'd be like, "Oh, Fluffy, it's so good to see you." And you're right. It fills that part of me that loves animals, and it kind of gives you more of that positive energy that you wanted to be a veterinarian. Like I
Right.
always loved animals. I wanted to be a vet. That's why I'm here.
Right.
So, yeah, just feeding that is important.
Yeah, and the important thing for people to consider is that what that looks like for each one of us can be different, right?
Yes.
Like for you, it might be speaking to the animals. For me, I talk to animals as well, and people would be like, "Oh, he's deaf." I'm like, "I don't care. I'm going to talk to him anyway."
It's exactly. I would say it's okay. Well, he can't hear you. I don't care. I'm still going to say it,
Yeah.
yeah.
For me, it was very often that physical contact,
Yes.
and for other people, it might just be standing near them. For it can look different, but one of
Yes.
the things that anybody in any role in veterinary medicine can do is to start to notice what part of being with the animal actually has you feel better. What, like if you were to say,
Mm,
why do I like being with animals, and really dive in and figure out what it is that you're getting, and then go get more of that connection or
right.
that
Yeah. If you're
experience.
struggling in your day, work on that
Yes.
part of it. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
they're there for the taking all day long, and certainly they're
Right.
not going to mind if you go and snuggle with them or pet them, or
Sure. Or
so
just stand and touch them or yeah.
yes, or
Or even
watch them.
watch them. There's something soothing about watching animals, their
Yes.
behaviors.
Yes, I have a thing. I don't it's a little strange. I love listening to a dog drink.
Oh,
There's
really?
the
That's
sound of the
hilarious.
dog lapping water, and I don't know if it's just the sound of health or a sound of that they're loved and cared for, and that they're
That's
animals are
interesting.
just so present in the moment, and they're just so focused on the simplest of life's needs,
Right.
and they're just going to get water. Like,
Yeah.
how simple, how
Yeah,
wonderful.
and they really don't have a lot of cares, like you were saying when you earlier you saw one of my dogs walk by and I'm like, yeah, as long as they're in this room with me, they're perfectly
Yeah.
fine. Like Trent's
Yeah.
over there snoozing, Parker's somewhere in here sleeping. But if they weren't in this room with me, it would be a problem.
Right.
But other
I
than that, they're
believe,
just happy.
right. I believe that at the end of the day, an animal wants to be loved. As long as their basic needs are met, they've got food, water, shelter, they're cared for.
Right.
They they just want to experience love. When they're aggressive or they're afraid, I mean, that's
Right.
normal.
Of
It's
course.
also part of the animal mind and survival, but they don't think about longevity. They don't have stories in their mind of, oh my gosh, I'm 8 and I'm passing away, but I should have lived till 12.
Right.
They don't think that. Now,
Mm.
for us, it's heartbreaking because of the
Yes.
loss. But
Right.
my belief is that from
Yes.
their perspective, I always tell families, if a dog is leaving this world surrounded by crying humans, their
Hmm.
life is complete.
Right.
The number
Yeah.
of years doesn't
And they're
matter.
not wishing for one more day
No,
or, yeah, I know.
yeah,
I've explained that to a lot of people during the euthanasia situation is like, this dog doesn't know the difference between another week, another
right,
year, another hour. He really doesn't. He just wants to be out of pain or with
right.
the people that he loves. Yeah.
Because sometimes what can happen is when we're grieving, and of course the humans are going to grieve because it is a loss for them,
Right.
we can compound that grief by bringing in other emotions that aren't necessarily needed or productive.
Yeah.
Guilt might be one of them, but another one is creating a story in your mind that the animal felt bad because they were somehow cheated, or and so there can be a peace knowing that that dog is complete. He's moving
Right.
on in his journey, whatever that is, whatever your beliefs
Yeah.
are, and he's looking down. He's saying, he would want to tell you, like, hey, I'm good.
It's all okay.
So you
Yeah.
can just be with your own grief and experience that and just let go of any concern about that.
Yeah, of all the guilt and all the
Yeah,
other things that they torture themselves with, right? Like I
right.
could have done more, I should have done more, should have made a
Exactly.
different decision, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. So, so tell me about the transition from being a hospital owner and being
Mhm.
in like very involved in being a good leader and all those things to moving that into the coaching business that you're doing now.
Okay. So for me, it was somewhat of a natural transition. And I would say it was a really transition that had been in play my entire life. I
Kind
would
of
even
back to
venture.
the psychology part.
Yeah. So even as a young person, I remember as a teenager, I always had a way of just understanding people and the way our minds work. And not just understanding it, I am fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And so even though I ended up not going to graduate school for psychology, I started fairly, use the word aggressively, but fairly in depth studying transformation and self development in about 2008. I opened my practice in 07. 2008 is when I really dove in and just was hooked. I mean, every course, weekend, retreat, program, I mean, I did. And there were two parts to that. There was the working on me, of course, which was
Right.
working with coaches, which was invaluable during my time
Wonderful.
as an
Mhm.
owner. But there was this other part of me that was studying it as a body of material, almost also looking at myself as a test subject.
Mm,
So there was almost like this two sides of learning. And then of course I would coach my employees and I would use that in conversations with clients, and I would host my staff meetings and there'd be a topic, something I'd learned on my weekend retreat.
right.
And so all of that developed over a decade and a half. So after I sold my practice and then was transitioning more into relief work and lessening my involvement in practicing, it was something I was so interested in taking everything I had learned and all the coaching I had received, and now paying that forward to help others who are where I
Mhm.
was.
Right.
So I went back and did several different fairly in-depth coach training programs, did that for about a year and got subspecialties in leadership and transitions. And now that's what I do. And I absolutely love it. And I feel it's an honor to be able to have conversations with people and have them share, and for me to be that mirror so that they can see what's standing in their way, what's holding them back from whatever experience they're looking for.
Right, right. Well, tell people if they don't haven't already heard or they don't already know, tell them what a coach can do for you. Because you said you were coached a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, and see, I had a lot of mentors when I was running my practice and got a lot of good coaching and mentoring from other hospital owners and other leaders and studied a lot of it on my own, but I never really understood that I could have like a life coach
Yeah.
and not in all those years. So tell people what's magical about that.
What's magical about it is that I'm going to venture to say all of us, because so much of what we deal with, it's not personal. It's at the level of being a human being. I always say
Mhm.
we all have the same stuff we're dealing with. If you're human, you've got it. I don't care who
Right?
you are. It just might have a different face, a different name, a different story behind it. And
Hmm.
so what happens is that we are living with stories, we're living with beliefs, we're living with certain just things that are in our subconscious that are holding us back. And so when a person wants to either reach a goal or create something or shift the way they communicate, or I worked with one doctor who she was very short tempered with her staff. She was the sweetest person in the world, but then would get stressed and snap at people. And she just couldn't not do it. She
Right.
noticed it. She felt
Yeah.
bad about it. And she'd be like, oh, damn, I
And
did
then
it
they
again.
think that's just the way I am or something,
Yes, there's
right?
something wrong with me.
Right. Yeah.
Or then they lack confidence. I can't speak up because people aren't gonna like me because I snap at them. And it just becomes this snowball
Right.
of complete disempowerment. People want to, improve themselves. They want to feel confident. They want to communicate. So when there's anything in life, whether it's a personal relationship, health, career, leadership, it doesn't matter what it is. When there's that feeling of, gosh, I wish I could, I just can't seem to, or I keep trying to, and you end up with more of the same, you want a better relationship, but you end up with another partner who is doing the same thing, or a new
Right.
boss with a different face and a different name, but it's the same boss all over again.
Yeah.
What we can start to do is look within, and the coach who is well trained and credentialed and knows how to help will ask questions that will bring forth what's currently not visible. And
Hmm.
when we enter coaching with this very narrow frame of viewpoint, it's like very narrow. We don't see possibilities. We don't see the way conversations could go. We don't see options. We don't see opportunities. We experience failure. We get down on ourselves. And through this process, that window of awareness and opportunity just starts to expand.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, okay. When I can start to shift who I am, when I can start to understand, and for me, I coach a lot around energy, when I start to understand my own energy and what that means and what type of energy would serve me better here, I actually have a choice about that. I'm going to have a difficult conversation with somebody. What would serve me best right now for how I show up so that I can get that desired outcome? There's
Right.
incredible power in that, and
Hmm.
the impact we can have on other people is just endless, really.
Yeah. It's so useful and it's so enjoyable. And you said if you have something that almost like a dream. If you have something that you've always wanted to attempt, or, and sometimes you don't even know that until you start coaching. But if you start to think, oh, well, this is all I'm ever going to have, or this is my life, or I have to go to work every day. That was a thing I had to challenge myself when I was kind of struggling at one point in my career. I'm like, oh, I have to go to work today. It's going to be busy and
Mhm.
lots of crap's going to happen. You start to get that story. And I don't know if it was before I started coaching or after, but my husband, he'd say, well, he goes, why don't you just quit? And I'm like, whoa, I don't want to quit. Well, then quit complaining about it.
Right.
So it's just having somebody on the outside look at you and go, well, you really love this. So why are you complaining? And just kind of changing the way you think about it. It's very empowering. And that's kind of what another person can do for you from the outside looking in.
Exactly. When we have an experience using that as an example, it, we have beliefs that are so true to us,
Yeah,
right?
nobody else believes it, but we do, right?
And it doesn't matter if other people believe it, because when somebody has a belief of people like me just can't get far, or
Right.
my team, they're never going to appreciate me, the clients are all jerks and they're never going to, you know, make my day okay, and like on and on and on and on, right? One thing that's important is for people to understand that that experience is very real and very true for them.
hmm
And because that's their truth, that doesn't mean it is the truth.
Yes.
So I like to think of truth with a lowercase t and truth with a capital T. So when somebody is thinking about a dream and they then think, I could never, there's no way I could ever own a practice, or there's no way I could ever leave this practice and find a job that pays me enough. Whatever the thing that's the thought that
Whatever,
comes up,
yeah, whatever the
that's,
limiting belief is, right?
yes, that's their truth in that moment, and that's okay.
Right.
But for them to just remember that they don't actually have to believe that truth, because it is not the truth, and they can start to shift and create brand new truths
Yeah.
that are much more empowering, and we'll
Well,
get
and
them
that
more
takes
later.
time, right? Like if you have a really deeply ingrained story, and I've told this story a million times on the podcast, but I had a deeply ingrained story that I was a bad writer,
Okay.
but I had always wanted to write a book. But I just had decided that was impossible because I was a bad writer. And it all came from this one teacher in junior high that told me I wasn't not good at writing. And I believed it. And I believed it to my core. And every time I had to write an email or anytime I had to write anything, I struggled. And when I finally decided that that wasn't true, that was something I believed and it was my story, but it really wasn't true, that the capital T truth,
Yeah.
it made all the difference. And it still didn't mean it was easy because
Right.
it still comes up. Every time I started to write a blog, I'm like, oh, this is hard. You're bad at this. It's like, no, you're not. You've written hundreds of them. Just sit down and write,
Right.
and it's that constant challenging of that story that happens once you learn that you have that story. Like I didn't know I had that story until I started getting coached, and a coach was like, well, why don't you write? I'm like, well, because I'm bad at it. Well, why do you think you're bad at it? Well, I've just always been bad at it. Like you have all these reasons that it's true until somebody makes you realize that it's just a story that you're believing that's not true.
Right. And on top of that, not only a story that you're believing, but one that you made up.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah. And what can happen, like your example was perfect. We say these things, they just roll off the tongue as if they're common knowledge. Well, why
Right.
don't you write a book? Well, because I'm not a good writer. Like, duh.
Right.
Doesn't everybody know that?
Yeah. Doesn't
Yeah.
everyone know I don't? Julie Capel doesn't know how to write.
Yeah. I mean, that's common knowledge. And so
Right.
we just, because it's so, we don't even consider that it's not true.
Mhm.
I always like to say there's an is about us, or like an I am, that like a gavel down, that's
Right.
it. Like, you have blonde hair and you're not a good writer. That just is what
Right.
it is. Sorry,
Exactly. Yeah.
but that's not true. And
No.
when we can start to uncover those things that are running in the background, worlds open up for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what a good coach will do. Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about leadership because that's your jam. And
Yes.
it's my jam too. I love leadership. So what do you think is important for people in this profession to know about leadership or thoughts about it?
Oh, there's so much.
I know that's a broad question, so
Yeah.
you can
Well,
pick whatever you want to talk about, I guess.
what I would offer is, I guess, starting from the beginning of a leadership journey, is first of all, leadership isn't for everybody, and that's okay. And just because a person is good at a particular skill doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be good at leading people in that skill. For example, you have your star
Mm,
vet tech. They're great in
right.
surgery. They're like whiz on the
Yeah.
catheters. Doesn't mean they're going to make a great lead tech because those are
True.
completely different skill sets. It doesn't mean they won't, but
Right.
it's something, if you are considering becoming a leader or promoting a leader, is to just consider what makes a good leader, and does this person, maybe even with some help and training, have that capacity.
Okay.
So many people say yes to leadership and then they're miserable because leadership really isn't right for them. They don't want to lead,
They
or
don't like it.
they're not
Yeah.
comfortable.
Right.
So that's one of the first things I would say is in the beginning of the leadership journey. And then I guess I would add, and if a person says yes to leadership, that they are also saying yes to a responsibility. Because by definition, when we are leaders, we are impacting others. That's
Okay.
the definition of leadership that I go by, is at any moment, anybody is a leader when they are having an influence or impact on another. And leadership isn't just restricted to your job position. You're a leader of your family. You might be a leader in your community. You could be leaders in your friend group. So we're leaders of ourselves and our lives, the most important leadership of all. So there's a responsibility because you're impacting people. So then the question then becomes, what type of leader do you want to be? What is the impact you want to have
Mm,
on the people around you? And how then do you go about gaining the skills, the knowledge, the awareness that you need to be able to do that? Because there is
gotcha.
so much toxic leadership out there. People step into leadership positions because they were promoted or they wanted the power or whatever. And then they have all their own stuff that they just bring to work and spew forth upon people all day, belittling people, yelling at people, not communicating, just all of the things that don't work.
Right.
And when you are leading, there's, to me, there's a responsibility. Once you accept that responsibility and you say, I want to be a leader who, and you can make your own list of whatever that looks like, then getting training, coaching on becoming that's the easy part. People like you,
Right.
people like me, we can help you get there.
Right.
First, you need to know where you want to get, and who do you want to be in this world? How do you want to show up? And what is the impact you want to have? And remembering that that impact is a ripple effect, because those people that you're leading are going to talk to your clients. They're going home to their families and their friends, and they leave miserable. Guess what happens at home? Guess what happens with their children, right? When you as a leader can positively influence others, you're having an impact on this world far greater than what's in the walls of your practice.
Right. Yeah. I love that idea that you're impacting others because I don't think everybody thinks of leadership that way. Like
Right.
I'm of the opinion that you can lead from any position in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're not the boss, if you're not the head tech, you're not the head doctor or whatever, you can still be a leader. And I like the fact that you said it's influence in what you're offering to other people that's important. And then that makes that true.
Yeah.
That if you're an associate veterinarian, you still can lead the rest of the team.
Yes. And well, two thoughts on that. One is, very often the leader of a team is not the person who's in charge. Because if the person who is actually assigned the leader is not leading, somebody else will.
Somebody will step into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Somebody may step in, somebody will, it just by default. And that can create a whole host of other problems. Um, what was the last thing you said?
I was talking about leading from other positions in the hospital, having influence in others, even if you're an associate.
Oh, I would offer to say that it's not even that associate veterinarians can lead. Associate veterinarians are leading. Every
Yes.
single moment that they
Mhm.
are with a staff member, if whatever position, working on a case, seeing an appointment, working out back, wherever, they are leading
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. And they don't always know, they don't always realize that, right?
Right. Yes,
If they
exactly.
did realize that they'd be terrified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to what do you talk to in veterinary hospitals if they feel like they have like a toxic culture? Like, what's the approach to trying to remedy that? Whether you're the actual leader, boss, or whether you're just in that environment. Like, is there something that you suggest people could do or think or change?
Well, the first thing I would say that comes to mind is that, everything flows downhill. So
True.
people need to start at the top and think about the people who are in leadership positions and how they are showing up as leaders. And it doesn't mean even that people have to be toxic in their leadership. They could be the nicest, sweetest people and still allowing a culture, a poor culture to develop. And because they're so nice and sweet, they don't even see how they're impacting that.
Right, right. Yeah.
You
Sometimes it's
know,
the lack of leadership that's the problem.
right. There's so
Yeah.
many aspects to it. So the first step is in assessing, right? So one of the things that I do is kind of like an audit, is to go in and look and say, what's going on here? Let's talk to the staff. Let's talk to the manager. Let's talk to the doctors. Let's interview everybody, find out what's going on, and then compile a report. We got to take the blood and put it in the machine and get the blood work out. It's the same
Right.
thing. You need to run a diagnostic. You can't fix a problem when you don't even know what the problems are. So the first step is to define, what do you want your workplace culture to be? What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like?
Because that can be different, right? For every leader.
Very different.
When I ask people, well, what do you want your hospital to feel like or, offer? It will be different.
Yes.
So, yeah,
And that's a question that a lot of practice owners and practice managers haven't even considered. They
right.
just know it stinks now. I don't
Yeah,
like
like
it.
what are your values? All
Yeah.
those things.
Everybody's
Yeah,
fighting. Our workplace culture is terrible. We need to fix it. Well, what do
right.
you want it to be like? Oh, I don't know. Right.
They just don't want it
So
to be what it is.
yeah. So the first
See
step
if all
is
these people behave.
right. So what do you want to create? What's currently present?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
then and then saying, okay, so now that we know this, what needs to shift to get you from where you are to where you want to be?
Yeah.
Sometimes there can be hard decisions that have to be made in that process.
Hmm.
And that's part of, getting coached through that and understanding your priorities and your commitments. Um, and sometimes the people in leadership have to take a good hard look. I mean, when I first started really studying a lot of this, and I was maybe 3 or 4 years into practice ownership, and we were small, and we were like all friends, and we would laugh during 3-hour dentistries and surgeries, and
Having a good time.
sharing,
Yeah.
all having a good time, right? And I love that. That's my personality. I don't like conflict, all of the things. Well, that's all great until something's not working and
Right.
somebody keeps showing up late every day or somebody has an attitude problem. And I would let things slide. Well, I don't want to make her feel bad. I don't want to start something. We're actually having a good day today. And with the bottom line, and I didn't realize this until I had coaching, was that I had a very big concern about being liked.
Hmm.
And even more, this is where the little knife came into the heart through another program I did, is when I got into an in-depth study of subconscious commitments, which I won't go into now, but it's part of the work I do with people. And I got present to the fact that I would have sworn my biggest priority is my practice and my culture. And then I got present to the fact that I was more committed to being liked than I was to my practice.
Yeah.
And I was
And a
like,
lot of people, that's true for a lot
oh,
of us. Yeah.
that was a wake up call that day. When it first hit me, it was literally like a knife in my heart. And then it
Yeah.
was like, okay, but that's okay. That's normal.
It's
So,
normal because the need to be liked is part of that tribal,
yeah,
that tribalism that we all have to stay safe, right?
right,
So when, I'm a people pleaser too, I totally get it. And I talk to people about this, but most of us are. There's very few people that want to be on the outs.
right.
And when you're a leader, unfortunately, you're putting yourself in the position that you sometimes are on the outs. And I would say
Exactly.
often are,
Often.
like I would walk into a room and people would scatter because they knew that I might say something like, why aren't you guys doing such and, whatever it was, but I was the boss, right? So I think that's a really hard thing for people to do is go from being the friend in the practice to being the boss and that separation. And that's why I think you're so driven to want to make everyone happy,
Right.
not have
Right.
that little like, well, maybe they don't like me, you know?
Exactly. Because I mean, there are people who just don't care, but for those who do, it's like, who doesn't want to not, who wants to, I should say, who wants to not be liked?
Right. Yeah. It's not natural.
However, at the end of the day, when something's not working and we can start to explore what are we really committed to here, it wasn't my commitment to being liked over the commitment to my practice wasn't wrong.
Right.
It just wasn't working for what I wanted to create.
Correct.
And so in that moment, once I gained that awareness led me to a place where I then had a choice. I can create a new commitment. It doesn't mean I'm going to not care if people like me. It's just
Sure.
not going to be the prevailing commitment. And what happened was I said, no, I'm committed to my practice. When I hire people, I sit there in that interview and I give them my word that we have a great workplace culture here. And then they
Right.
come in and see that that's a lack of integrity. I need
Right.
to be committed to that. And I started to shift those commitments. And quite honestly, nobody didn't like me. They actually liked me more because
They
now
like
I
you
was
better when you're doing
consistent.
your job. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I was consistent. And they didn't have to see me tolerating things from people that shouldn't be tolerated.
Right.
So that was just all part of my own fear. And when,
Mm-hmm.
again, coaching helped me to see all of that. I never would have seen that on my own.
Yeah. So I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is it doesn't really matter where you're starting from, how messed up your hospital culture is, how messed up you feel like you are, which, I don't want to call anyone messed up because none of us
Yeah,
are, but
no,
you can start from anywhere and improve,
yes.
but it's mostly getting the awareness about what's going on with you and the way you're showing up.
Yes, there's for me, that's part of it.
Yeah,
That's part of one of the steps. No practice culture is hopeless, and but it's not going to be easy to shift that if you don't know what you want to create and you don't know what is keeping the practice the way it is right now. Because
right,
you can have that one toxic employee who complains and gossips and doesn't do her job. She might need to just leave,
right,
or B, she might need to be heard, and she might be feeling resentful, she might be feeling resigned, she might be disengaged because she says, why bother, because there's no accountability here and nobody else is helping, and so I stopped helping.
right,
And if she starts to see other things shifting, her engagement might come back, her
right,
loyalty might come back. So it's not that everybody needs to just go, but
right.
all of these things need to be figured out and discovered. And sometimes it is that your best surgical tech needs to go.
Yeah,
He's not interested in shifting. And
right.
it's just you're never going to create what you want with that energy present.
Yeah. And I think that that's a hard thing for people as leaders, or hospital owners to understand. It's like just because you take the most toxic person and fire them doesn't
Mhm.
mean that somebody else isn't going to take that position. Because if the position is there because you're allowing it to be there, someone else is going to step up into that
Yeah.
disgruntled. And you can't fix it by cleaning house and hiring all new people because you still haven't solved what the basic problem is with the
Right.
hospital. Yeah.
And I would offer in exactly that point. If there's somebody listening to this who has had a toxic team, had a lot of people leave for whatever reason or the other, brought in new people, fast forward 6 months, they have a toxic team, people leave, and it keeps happening.
Mhm.
The common denominator there is often the people in leadership. And it's not
Right.
because they're misintentioned. It's not because they're mean or they're awful
Right.
or they're terrible leaders. It's just sometimes there's just a lack of awareness, a lack of knowledge. And quite honestly, they just don't know how to stop that from. I keep getting these toxic teams. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know how to stop it. That's where people like us come into play. You
Right.
know, it's, yeah, there are the people out there who are just toxic leaders and they don't care and it is what it is. And you're not going to shift them. They shouldn't be in leadership, in my opinion. But there are so many people out there who are feeling helpless in their leadership. They just don't understand why they can't shift something. And
Right.
it's always shiftable if you're willing to do the work.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of self-work involved and there's a lot of understanding. I really enjoy personality profiling and I think because when I did it, it explained so much about me and the way I operate and it showed me my weaknesses as well as my strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So once I figured that out, I'm like, oh, I'm not very good at this. I kind of knew it, but I think when you put some time into figuring yourself out, it helps so much. It's like, okay, so if I'm not good at this thing, I need to hire somebody that is,
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to hire everyone like me.
Right.
Because we want to, like I'm a high I person and so I just like lots of stuff going on and fun and fast paced but people like me miss details you know, and not that I can't do detail, but I don't enjoy it. So now I need to find someone that enjoys the detail to to keep track of that for me and understand that just because that person doesn't like chaos doesn't mean they're not fun. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it just kind of really opens yourself up to self-awareness and then how do I hire the right people to fit with me and how do I understand the other people better so I can work as the best leader for them.
Right.
Because
And
being
not
a
only just,
leader is about being the right person for your people, I think, in a lot of ways.
yes. And you don't have to be perfect in being that right person for your people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
You know how many mistakes I made over
oh,
my leadership journey? Like so many, and so many really big ones,
yep.
like really, really big mistakes.
Yep.
And just like, oh, yeah, had I figured this out earlier, it would have solved me so much grief. But that's all part of it. And I like to tell people that when I coach them, it's like, look, this is a human journey. None of us are there. I don't care how old you get. I'm better at stuff now than I was when I was 20 or 40, but I'm still not perfect at it. I still
Right.
mess up, I still
Yeah.
I still am a human.
I, back to what you were just saying, I, it's so important for, like, yes, a team needs to have different personalities, different skills to complement each other. And as a leader, it's also important to recognize where people fit best as far as their roles, because very
Yes.
often we'll have people in the wrong jobs.
Yes.
But that being said, to me, being a leader is learning how to do certain things, like how do I hire, how do I delegate, how do I not
Right.
take everything on myself.
Yeah.
But more fundamentally than that, it's also learning how to shift who you are, to shift
Mm.
how you show up, the
Hmm.
energy
For
behind,
different people.
yeah,
Mhm.
for different people, for different situations, but to have that awareness so that you have the ability to choose and to shift how you're showing up and
Right.
impacting other people. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's not what you do, it's who you're being while you're doing it.
Yes.
It's not what you say, it's, the people say it's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
100%. They've done studies where like 100% of the time, the facial expression and tone of voice was more powerful than the words that came out of somebody's mouth.
Yes.
Because it's the energy, it's the who the person is being when they're saying it. You could say hello. I could be like, hello. And I could be like, hello.
Yeah.
Two totally different meanings, same word,
Right. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I think a lot of us intuitively know that because we work in vet med and we have to deal with different personalities every like 15 or 30 minutes. Different client walks in the door, different client, different personality, different personality. And because you do that every day, you kind of get good at reading people. At least I did. I'm like, all right, this person's very detailed. I'm going to have to pull out my detail. This person's in a hurry. I'm going to have to get this done fast and get the heck out of here. So once I figured out how to read people, I got so much better at giving them what they needed, which in turn makes them so much happier.
Yes, it makes them connect to you more because what you've just described is mirroring people,
Yeah.
right? And that's why even when people are talking really loud and really fast, you can either match it so that they feel connected, or
Hmm.
if you want to tone them down, you can get extra quiet and then they'll match you.
They bring it down. Yeah.
But to back up a step in that process is it requires a level of presence and focus on others. And when
Right.
we are so wrapped up and caught up in our swirling minds and we're zooming in and out of rooms and we don't even remember, what happened today, it's difficult inside of that type of an energy to be present, to
Yes.
notice that Mrs. Smith brought out a piece of paper and is so detailed, and therefore I should offer her the details she's looking for. That
Right.
requires being over there with her for that moment.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a skill in of itself, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because so
But when your mind, I was going to say, when your mind is swirling, when you don't have that sense of calm within yourself, for lack of a better word, it's hard to do that.
hmm. Oh,
Difficult.
yeah.
And vet med's
Yeah. It's
hard.
not easy
Mm.
in any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination. So I'm probably going to change the topic totally, but what do you think is the primary thing that most veterinarians struggle with that you think that they could change? That makes sense?
Um,
Like, what do you see as the most that your clients come to you, your veterinarians come to you, and then you say, I have this problem or this problem or this problem. What do you think those problems are?
I would say categorically the number one thing that most people would say is bothering them is a feeling of being stuck in some way, shape, or form,
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
lack of seeing options, a lack of solutions, a lack of either a way out or a way in or a way through. Whether it's different ways to have a conversation or a different way to approach the person who's difficult or not nice at work, or it's like I financial, like it doesn't matter what it is. There's just
Hmm.
what happens, we can start to feel, we can start to go into what's called victim energy or level one energy, lower level energy. And from that space is where we become resigned, and it is what it is, and there's nothing I can do, and with all this debt there's no way I
Kind of
can
like
move.
Eeyore, the
Yes,
Eeyore syndrome.
100%. In fact, when I do my talks on this topic, I have a slide of or to describe this type of energy.
Yeah.
And and it is by definition, that type of energy has very limited scope of possibility, very, very, very limited. So as long as a person is sitting in that space, which isn't wrong or bad, and sometimes is
Right.
actually beneficial, but for a long period of time, they are going to perceive their quote truth, their lowercase t truth, is that it is hopeless. There's no point. Why I'm not going to bother talking to her. Every other time I've tried, it hasn't worked out. Right.
Right.
So then they're like, here I am. And then they
Yeah.
start to feel like a victim to it. And I from what I've seen, after being in this profession for many, many, many years, there's a lot of that in veterinary medicine. And I would suffice to say, a lot of it is actually taught to us.
Yes.
We
Yeah, that's
are
frustrating.
taught so much of the disempowerment and the unhappiness that is present in vet med right now has been culturally developed and taught to us over decades. And I've
Mhm.
seen it. I've seen it
Yep.
happen. I remember 20 years ago, 15 years ago, looking at journal articles when people first started thinking about wellness was like the hot topic. And so every magazine wanted to talk about it. Every
Right.
time I got I got it in the mail back then. Every time I got a journal in the mail or eventually opened it on my phone or my iPad, front page, you know, depression and vet med and
Veterinary
why people are
suicide.
disempowered. And
Yeah.
it's like, gosh, stop convincing everybody
Can't
they're
make any
miserable.
money. Yeah. It's a low paying profession. Yeah, all that.
I remember in vet school, we're going way, way, way back to the olden days. We actually, one of the clubs or classes or whoever was selling t-shirts, and it was really, back then we thought it was cute. And the t-shirt it said why I didn't become a real doctor, and then like listed, all the things. And it was like they were all like silly, like because
Yeah.
I love the scent of anal glands on my clothes, because this, because, and we
Yeah. It was
thought it
all
was
like,
funny back then, but as I
yeah.
look back, it wasn't funny.
No.
That was a paradigm that we were all buying into. We were almost being brainwashed
Right.
into this culture of disempowerment, this culture of misery, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm here to offer, and I know you are passionate from what you shared earlier, is it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. It really, I would say, not even does it not have to be that way. It isn't that way.
Right. Right.
It isn't that way. We are seeing it with they always say colored glasses. We're seeing it with crap colored glasses.
Yes.
Like we're looking at it through a prism of our own self-induced misery, I guess, you know? Like
Yeah.
I've had people come to me and, oh, it's veterinary medicine so bad. Well, what happened today? Well, one client gave me a bad review, and they said such and such or such and such. And I'm like, well, why did they say that? Oh, they didn't like the prices or something. I'm like, all right, so let's look at this here. How many people today were upset? Oh, well, just this one. Well, how many did you see? Well, I saw at least 20. I'm like,
Right.
so why are you worried about that one person out of 20? Like anybody else would be thrilled with those odds. Like 19
Right.
people love you and one person doesn't.
How about the client
Why?
that brought you cookies?
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
happens all the time. I've gotten pearl necklaces from clients,
Oh,
silk scarves, cookies, cakes, like just showered with gifts over the years,
I
right?
had a client try to give me her BMW once.
Oh man, you
I
didn't
I
take it?
I did not. I was like, I cannot take your car, but thank you. And she had a
But I
lot of
would
money.
like
She's like, I'll
to.
just buy another one. I'm like, and I'm not taking your car, but
That's
thank you.
hilarious. I love that. But that's the truth, right? And we choose to believe the one client that's upset and they're not even upset at you. They're upset at their situation. They're upset at their problems.
Exactly. But we take it personally.
Yeah, yeah. So I really like when you say it doesn't have to be that way.
I would love to explain a concept real quick, if that's okay, that
Yes, please do.
would perhaps shed some light on what you and I just described that we've observed.
Okay.
So, as I've mentioned a few times, like, I work a lot with energy, and
Yes.
we all experience different levels of energy throughout our day. All of us. You're human, you do it. There's 7 levels, and we all experience all of them. One of the things that I do with clients is an assessment, and that assessment, I won't go into detail, but basically helps them to see exactly how they experience energy. We each, in a moment, are experiencing a certain type of energy that we show up in a situation. If I walk into a meeting and I'm like, ugh, this sucks, and it's going to be another one of these meetings. Or if I walk into a meeting going, you know what? I am not putting up with their crap. If they say one word to me, or if I walk into a meeting and I say, you know what? This is amazing. We're finally going to get to talk about all the opportunities from everything we can create with it's not working at this practice. That energy, none of them are right or wrong. It's just going to have very different outcomes.
Right.
So each of us individually comes forth with an energy. Well, collectively, groups have energies. So a team, a sports
Hmm.
team, a work team, a family has collective energy that it's operating at in any given moment. So when we look at bigger groups, we look at cultures. Cultures have their own type of energy. Well, veterinary medicine is in itself a culture. It's a
Mm,
subculture, right? And we're all in it together. Well, that culture has its own energy, and energy is constantly shifting, right? It's not like this is your energy, here's how you are.
right.
Constantly shifting. So what happens from my point of view, when I look, if I were to pretend like a bird's eye view of this like pool of veterinary medicine as a collective, in general, the profession is operating at a lower level of energy a lot of the time.
Mm,
Now, in the past 10, 15 years, there's a lot of people working to help up level that energy. And there
right.
are a lot of ways to up level the energy, but there's so many in the profession that are so committed, like pulling it back down, like individuals will be hold on to their misery like for
Right.
dear life, like just don't want to
Yeah.
let go
Like
of
it's
it.
familiar, so they don't want to change it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I see. We have for generations been breeding this culture of basically like a victim mentality almost, and a
Right.
lot of it's
Yeah.
real. I'm not poo-pooing what people experience every day. I'm
Right.
speaking very general here.
Yeah.
So when we can start to bring awareness to that and start to have people let go of those truths of how awful everything is, the energy level starts to rise as a group, as the team, as the individual.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean that the jerky client isn't saying the exact same thing. But guess
Right.
what? Your response, how you interpret that jerky client is what changes. How it affects your day, how it affects you going home to your family, how it affects the team, the culture.
Hmm.
What is practice culture? Practice culture is their resonating energy that they show up with every day.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the circumstances may not change, but the experience inside of the circumstances can change, and it can change for you, it can change for your team, and ultimately it can change for all of us as a collective whole. It's just
Yeah.
obviously, takes
Well,
longer.
and you can see it when you walk into a hospital. If you go to more than one veterinary hospital, you can feel the energy.
Yes.
The ones that really are committed to the clients and really want everyone to be happy and, do good work and if they all buy into that culture, they are really going to create less angry clients.
100%. I would, from the day I opened my practice, I would, until the day I sold it, I would say, for not 100%, but I ran under the premise that upset clients were created.
Yeah.
And if they walk in the door like that because they were created upset at 5 other practices and they walk in with the proverbial arms crossed, our job was to uncross those arms,
Right.
you know,
Win
and
them over.
and it's possible because like I said, the circumstances could be the exact same. And doing relief work, especially, you see so much. You could have employee A does a nail trim, draws some blood, does some things, and has to run the dog back up front. And there's the stuff on the table. Employee B walks by and is like, do 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 do, throw the stuff away, spray down the table, wipe it, and hey, Sarah, I cleaned your table, so just so you know, you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
Same exact scenario. Employee B comes by, God damn it, she's always leaving her mess. Why am I always the one? And then she doesn't say anything to Sarah. Sarah comes back and goes, oh no, where'd my mess go? Somebody's pissed at me. And then the employee B goes off and says to employee C, can you believe I had to clean up after her again? The exact same situation, the same cleaning, the same dog, the same blood tubes. So it is not the circumstances that dictate how people show up in the culture that's created.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's all possible.
I love that. That's great. So before we start to wrap this up, is there something that we didn't talk about or that I didn't ask you that you think we should really get out there? I do want you to come back and talk
Okay.
about the energy
Okay.
because I don't know a lot about that and I'd like to learn about that. So
Okay.
maybe you can come back on another podcast and we'll talk about your 7 levels of energy and how that
I
all
would
works.
love to talk
Because
about
on a basic
energy.
level, I understand energy, but I don't know that theory. So I'd love to hear
Well,
that.
and just to plant the seed so people can look out for a future episode, it's I love to talk about okay, at the end of the day, I'm a veterinarian. I'm an applied scientist, like most of the people listening to this in
Right.
some way. I love to be able to talk to people about energy in a way that is not very woo woo. I do meditate and
So they don't check out.
I can get all woo woo with you if you want, but to
Right.
talk about it in a practical, applicable way,
I love
because
that.
we are all everything's energy. My desk is energy. I am energy.
Right.
Energy is not woo woo, it just is.
It is.
And when we
Yeah.
start to understand that, I would love to come back and talk about
Okay. Let's plan on doing that.
that. Okay.
I'll put that on the list and make sure we
Sure.
get back together again. Because when you talked about that, I was like, oh, we need to talk about that. But we
Yes.
don't have time to do that here, or we'll be here
No.
another
But
two
let me think
hours.
if there's one other little
There's one
point
like
for
thing
today.
we didn't say that we should say.
Okay. This is my favorite thing to say. I
Okay.
didn't I never do a webinar without saying this. I never do a talk without saying this.
Okay.
The number one most important key to creating happiness for yourself, to creating a life that you would love to live, whether at home, at work, I don't care where, everywhere. The ingredient without which everything we just talked about will be irrelevant is the willingness to take responsibility for your life, to take responsibility for your own growth and development, whatever that looks like for you. It does not mean taking blame for everything or fault, but taking responsibility for whatever is not working in your life and saying, nobody else, there's no happiness fairy that's going to come along and tap me on the head.
No lottery
Nobody's
winning.
going to do it for me.
Right.
What do I need to do? Stop blaming, stop complaining, and start taking responsibility. And if there's a person in your life who is toxic and awful, it's not your fault. But you start to say, okay, what do I need to do to shift this? Every single thing. What do I need to do to shift? What do I need to do? Where can I be responsible? And 99.9% of the time, for you even, and for me, who are coaches, I've been studying this stuff for almost 20
Yeah.
years.
It still
It
applies.
involves getting help.
Yeah.
Because as human beings, the way our minds work is we have a very limited scope view of ourselves. We cannot see what we cannot see. And my very last thing I will say before we leave, because I quote him all the time, my longtime coach, who I love dearly, he always said to me, because I'd go, oh, it was always me, oh, and I'd have an
Oh,
oh
light
moment.
bulb.
He would always say, Jen, you can't see your own eyebrows.
Oh, that's a
And I
good
was
one.
always, yep. And I always was said, yep, you're right. A coach is a mirror. A coach is not going to tell you what to do. A coach is not going to give you your answers. That is coming from within you. But a coach will be that mirror that you need to be able to see your own eyebrows or
Perfect.
whatever's inside of you so that you can start to make the shifts to make a better life for yourself.
I love that. So my people on my podcast know that they can come to me for coaching and go to my website and all the things. So tell them where to go if they want to learn more about you or get coaching from you or check out your website. Where do they need to go?
Yes. Well, my website is simple. It's drjenniferedwards.com. So you can go visit that. I have a YouTube channel with lots of videos. I'm also on all the social platforms at Dr. Jennifer Edwards on all of them. I have a free ebook that they can download on my website that will put them on my email list, which I do not sell, do not use for any spam. I share articles and videos and maybe some events. And I am always happy to jump on a free call with people. If somebody is thinking about training for their team, if they're thinking that they're running a retreat or an event, they need a speaker or private coaching, the link is right there on my website. We jump on a call, we talk about what are you trying to
What are
create?
you
What do
looking
you
for?
want?
Yeah.
And let's talk about how we can make it happen.
Yeah,
And
and
if
don't be
it's,
afraid of that, you guys. It's
yeah,
sometimes people like they hesitate for months before they reach out for a free coaching with me. And they'll be like, "Well, I've been listening to your podcast and they're like intimidated or something." Like it's not scary. Like we're
right.
just on Zoom and we're just talking like normal people because we are normal people.
Yes,
So don't be
exactly.
afraid to reach out. Like
Right.
really, and don't think that there's something wrong with you that you have to talk to a coach or you want to talk to a coach. It's more of a want than a need. But man, if you do it, it's going to change your life, like in so many ways.
So many ways. Coaching is not about fixing. There
Right.
is nothing to fix.
Yeah.
Every single person out there is whole, perfect, and complete, just the way they are and just the way they aren't. And what else? What else do you want to create for your life?
Right.
You
Right.
know, don't and last little thought about veterinary medicine specifically, it applies to everybody, but really in veterinary medicine is, and guess what? It's going to involve an investment of time and money on yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you are worth,
You have to be willing to invest
yes,
the work into it and the time.
and you are
Just
worth
like
investing
any
in.
other hobby or any other CE, like we're so
Yeah,
into CE, but
right.
then when it comes to getting a coach or going into some program that's not medical, we feel like we're wasting our time and our money. And it's like, it's so the opposite.
Right. It's kind of like the client who complains about, the cost of a vaccine and then drives away in their Mercedes.
Right.
Well, I would put it back at everybody out there, you know, people who won't invest time and money in themselves, but then they'll go spend the money on a vacation. Well, the vacation comes and goes, and while it's very important, I'm not going to discount taking
Right.
time off and
Everybody
fun.
should go on vacation.
That everybody should go on vacation, and there are other ways also of spending time on yourself so that you can feel better, live better, experience life better.
Yeah, it's great. Well, this has been super fun, and I definitely want to have you back because I've loved meeting you, and I'm sure people listening have loved meeting you. And I wish you all the success, but we will get back together in a month or two, and we're going to talk about energy because I want to learn about that.
I would love to, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you
Mm.
so much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. This is Dr. Jennifer Edwards, and go out there and do something for yourself today. Yeah. All right. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye. Bye, Jennifer.
Bye.